For clarity, I have a hearing disability that has made me hard of hearing. I still look back on this experience wondering what could have happened and what I should have done differently. This happened around a year ago after the holiday season. I live in a small suburban neighborhood that borders a forest in southern Quebec. It's a quiet area where most residents know each other, which I prefer. Around winter, I take my dog Monty on walks in the local forest. He's a Rottweiler Husky mix, perfect for runs. The forest has several trails, none challenging for non-hikers. It was an afternoon. I'd just finished a late lunch and decided to walk with Monty. As usual, my dog went ballistic when we turned toward the forest entrance. It was cold for a February day. Fresh snow lined the paths overnight. I let my dog off the leash so he could run around. Yellow patches and boot prints in the snow signaled others had walked their dogs earlier. Most people go before noon since the sun sets around 4 p.m., so I didn't expect to see anybody. After walking for around 30 minutes, we came to a fork. One path hadn't been walked yet, so feeling semi-adventurous, I took it. I have a concrete memory of the trails, so I knew where I was going. The trail led to a clearing. I scanned the surroundings with my Christmas binoculars until I saw a strange shape along the tree line. When I focused, I saw a blue tarp and what looked like a makeshift shelter. Curious as I was, it was getting dark and I wanted to get home. Turning around, Monte and I started back. He ran ahead, but something seemed off. He was more alert, sniffing the trail more than normal. When I looked down, my eyes widened. There was a set of footprints, much larger than my own. I turned my boots over to compare them. The prints were different. There were no other forks in the trail, so whoever took it had to have passed me. I figured they passed while I was using my binoculars. It was significantly darker outside, but I could still make out my surroundings. As we walked back, Monte stopped abruptly and started barking relentlessly in my direction. As I turned around, I saw him. A man, probably around 6'4", wearing charcoal snow pants and a white camo jacket, only about a meter away. He didn't make any movements. He just stood there with his hands in his coat pockets. I didn't recognize him, so I assumed he was a hiker or from out of town. He looked like he was muttering something, but I couldn't read his lips due to the lack of lighting and not knowing if he was speaking English or French. I felt like an idiot for not bringing my phone. I tried to communicate that I was hard of hearing and that it was getting late. I got home around 4:30. By then, it was completely dark. I followed my standard night routine, not really thinking much about the encounter. But in the middle of the night, something happened that still shakes me. I woke up to Monty licking my hand, which he does to get me out of bed in the morning. I tapped my phone to check the time. It was 3 a.m. I noticed a message from my neighbor asking if everything was all right. The message was a few minutes old and mentioned Monty had been barking like he was possessed. I looked up to see Monty was no longer in my room. I walked downstairs to find him barking hysterically at the patio door. As I approached, I struggled to see anything with my vision still blurry. I tried to focus when the motion sensor light turned on. My heart sank. The man from the forest was standing in my backyard. I didn't think twice. I stepped away from the door and texted 911. I ran up to my room with Monty and grabbed the machete from under my bed. I'm a shorter woman with a background in martial arts, but I know the best move in a fight is to not fight at all. I sat in my room guarding Monty and myself until the police came. With my heart beating out of my chest, I sat opposite the door with Monty by my side. It didn't last long until Monty sprang up and started barking violently at the bedroom door. My hands were sweating profusely as I watched a shadow cast from underneath the door. The movement suggested the man was seconds from breaking into my room. Those had to be the longest minutes of my life as I anticipated the door handle turning or the door breaking in. Luckily for me, it never did. When the police arrived, I explained everything while they searched the property. The glass on the patio was smashed completely, but nothing was missing. The police found the gate in my backyard open. It leads to the forest, which is where they believe the man disappeared.
I let them know about the shelter I saw in the woods. I took Monty and some belongings to stay with a family friend while I got the patio door fixed. I never got a follow-up from the police, but ever since that day, I decided to stick to roads when walking my dog.
My name is Ember, and I'm a 16-year-old girl who lives in Illinois with my younger sister Kate, who's 15. My dad works for a deforestation group about 30 minutes from our house. It was a normal morning on December 5th as my sister and I were getting ready to go to the movies. We decided to watch Terrifier 3, which was 18 plus, but nobody paid attention. Plus, we looked older anyway. We made our way to the movies and easily got in. However, halfway through the film, my phone buzzed loudly enough for the whole theater to hear, which killed everyone's vibe as they turned toward me with annoyed looks. My sister and I scurried out until I tripped, which was embarrassing. After we exited, I checked my phone. It was my dad. Instead of calling back, I received a text that said something like, "Hey, would you mind bringing me some lunch since the small cafe in the woods is shut today?" I looked over at Kate. Neither of us second-guessed the message since it seemed normal. We arrived home, packed some food for him, and took my car downtown to the woods. I've always loved that place. The scenery was amazing, with a hill that led down to a lake, perfect for fishing and photos. Kate and I got out and walked down the path. I took out my phone to call my dad, but he didn't pick up. Confused, I looked over at Kate, who was just as confused. Why wouldn't he respond when he just called us? I decided to message him instead. After a few moments, I saw the 3 little dots appear. He responded by telling us to walk down the small hill and wait for him at the lake, which we followed. The sun was slowly setting since it was winter. The sky had a beautiful, radiant orange glow. Kate pointed down to the lake, where a man in black was sitting on the deck by the water with his back to us. We guessed it was our dad. We walked down and stopped a little behind him. I called out his name, but he didn't move. Kate grew uneasy, and her attitude made the scene even more eerie. I slowly pulled off the hood he was wearing and revealed a man who definitely wasn't our dad. Kate and I shrieked as he turned around and began waving my dad's phone around like a maniac, smiling like he was happy to see us scared. I blurted out asking why he was using our dad's phone, but he didn't respond. Instead, he lunged and grabbed Kate's arm as she screamed. Luckily, I was strong enough to pull her away, and we started running as fast as we could. The adrenaline pushed through us. I had never seen either of us run that fast. Behind me, I heard stomps getting closer, so I knew we were being chased. I didn't dare turn around. Finally, we reached the car. I slammed the door shut and locked it as the man came to my window, then crouched down out of sight as I reversed and sped away back home. When we got home, my dad and mom were there. We arrived panting and explained the whole situation. My dad was furious and said his phone had been stolen while he was working, so he decided to come home. He said the man must have taken his phone and messaged us. My dad called the police and filed a report. They used the IMEI number to track the device, which was still on the deck by the lake, and they returned the phone to my dad. They said there wasn't much they could do since the phone was already found. I thought this was the end of it, but I wouldn't be telling this if it was. 6 hours later, around 1 a.m., I got an unknown message that said, "I like that your house is lit only by your bedroom TV." I immediately went cold and pale. I paused the TV and heard rustling outside my window. My room was on the 2nd floor. I shut my phone and listened. Slowly, I peeked through the blinds and saw the man smiling with a gun pointed at my window. I screamed and pulled away as glass shattered everywhere across my room. My parents ran in, followed by Kate. I screamed for them to crouch and told them the man was outside with a gun. When my dad went to check, the man was gone. Then we heard another loud bang and more glass breaking downstairs in the kitchen. We ran and locked the bedroom as Kate called 911. My mom hugged us as we cried in fear. Throughout the situation, I kept wondering how he knew where we lived. A few moments later, the police arrived and searched the whole house, but nobody was there. Kate and I explained the situation again, and one of the officers said they should check the car. Surprisingly, a small air tag was found on my tire, which explained how the man knew where we lived and why he crouched before I sped out of the woods. The police told us they would patrol the streets and do everything they could to find the man. A few months later, he still hadn't been found, but he never returned, which I hope it stays that way. Me, Kate, and my parents are still traumatized, but mostly I felt stupid as the older sister for not being alarmed when the person didn't respond to calls and only responded through texts. All I know is that I'll be more careful and never go to secluded places again, especially when I'm responsible for someone else's safety.
It was 2021. One word to describe my day: hectic. Work was a show. This was prime COVID time, so I was working from home. I was supposed to be meeting with my extended family upstate and ended up finally getting off a nearly 3-hour Zoom meeting a whole hour and a half after everyone else had already arrived at my parents' house. That didn't include the next 2 hours the trek up would take me. I filled up 2 cups of coffee in my kitchen. God knew I'd need them. The second I opened my front door, I realized this drive would be more of a show than I thought. The snow and wind had picked up. The streets were barely plowed. The ground had at least 2 feet of snow already, and it was supposed to snow like this for most of the night. I had to be driving under 25 on most residential roads. My car was a really old, crappy Hyundai, which wasn't ideal for extreme weather. It didn't have anti-lock brakes either. I'm a fast driver though, so when I got on the highway, I raised my speed to 70, which was probably faster than safe. I finally arrived at my parents' house around 9. They had begun dinner without me, but thankfully weren't too far along. A few drinks and gift sharing later, I started to lose track of time. I got so caught up in seeing relatives I hadn't spoken to in a while that I basically forgot I still had to drive home, even as most of my family started to leave. Once I finally got in my car, it was past midnight, and at least another foot of snow had accumulated. I was buzzed, but I figured I was sober enough to drive home. Not that I condone drinking and driving at all. I was tired and simply wanted to get home. As I was heading towards the highway, I realized the roads were completely dead. I made the grave mistake of raising my speed to 40 down one particular road because as I began to approach a bend, I realized my car had gone into a skid. I tried not to panic. I started to steer into the skid and downshifted, but as I got closer to the curve and my car still wasn't slowing down, I started to panic. Impact. My car went straight off the side of the road and into a tree, and the airbag deployed. I was momentarily in shock from the impact, but thankfully, I was relatively unscathed. My car was ruined. The whole hood was buried in a bank of snow surrounding the tree I hit. No chance I was pushing it back onto the road. The first thing I did was phone my roadside assistance company, and they said they'd send a truck to my location, but because of the horrible conditions, it could take up to 40 minutes. I was on a deserted road, surrounded by forest and no houses for miles, so I decided to also call my parents. My dad said he'd get in his car and drive over. Then I hung up and waited. As I was sitting there, I began to hear something over the wind howling outside. There were undeniably footsteps in the snow. I couldn't tell exactly from where, but they sounded somewhat distant. I opened the driver's side door and stepped out, looking over the roof of my car. I wasn't hearing footsteps anymore. Instead, I was hearing some new sounds. It sounded like some kind of wet slurping. I looked over to where I thought the sound was coming from, and I could see some movement by the tree line. It was dark as hell, but I was pretty certain I was looking at a person. I called out, "Hello?" The sound stopped, but no one called back. I sat there for a few more seconds awkwardly, but no one ever responded or appeared. I couldn't see any more movement either.
I was officially freaked out, so I got back in my car and locked the doors. What couldn't have been a whole minute later, I heard footsteps in the snow again outside. Then I heard something hitting the passenger side window like a rock was thrown at it. I couldn't see out the passenger side window because it was covered in snow, or any of the windows for that matter. Once again, I opened the driver's side door and stepped out. Checking my immediate surroundings, I made a disturbing discovery. There were boot prints in the snow circling all around my car and then leading away from my passenger side door into the woods. I felt sick to my stomach. I also noticed there were drops of blood in the snow. I opened my driver's side door and grabbed my 9mm out of the glove compartment. Clutching it in my right hand, I began to follow the prints leading into the woods. I was convinced someone was out there with me. As I followed the prints, the drops of blood began to grow larger. It looked like someone had been bleeding profusely. And then I saw some dark mass lying in the snow just past the tree line. I couldn't tell what it was. I was just praying it wasn't a person. I took out my phone and enabled the flashlight. It wasn't a person. It was a dead deer, seemingly slaughtered by some larger predatory animal. The stomach was ripped completely open, and shockingly, the deer had been completely decapitated. I swept the flashlight over the surrounding few feet, but I didn't see the head anywhere. I decided this was getting too weird, and I started heading back to my car. I got back and opened the driver's side door, and as soon as I did, it was all I could do to keep myself from vomiting on the spot. Lying in the driver's side seat of my car was the severed head of a deer, placed on the seat as if it was looking right at me. I booked it out of there and made it a few minutes down the road before headlights appeared in the distance. I ran towards the car, waving my hands and shouting like a madman, still holding my handgun. Thankfully, it was my dad, and he stopped the car and asked me what the hell I was doing. I got in the passenger seat and explained everything. And I kid you not, he literally didn't believe me. I felt more comfortable going back to my car with my dad now, so he drove the two of us over there and we got out. The footprints were still all around my car, but the deer head was gone. All that remained was a large spot of blood on my driver's side seat. I think once my dad saw that, he started to believe me. The deer corpse was also gone. All that remained were drag marks in the snow. The tow truck finally showed up and he towed my car. My dad asked me if I wanted to call the police, but honestly, I just didn't have the energy to file a police report. I was exhausted and just wanted to go to sleep. I figured calling the police wouldn't accomplish jack anyways. So, that's my story. I have no idea who was in the woods that night and what they wanted. Maybe they were just trying to scare me, or maybe they had worse intentions.